Hello and welcome to the New Thought Men's Podcast, where we explore what it is to be a healthy spiritual man today. I'm Eamon. It's great to have you with us. Welcome to the New Thought Men's Podcast. I am Eamon. Today we are here with Mark Anthony Lord. Mark, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I'm really honored. Thank you.
It's great to have you here. And for those who don't know you, I want to just share just a little bit about your history, your past. Mark Anthony Lord is an ordained minister and internationally recognized spiritual teacher and healer. Mark founded the Bodhi Spiritual Center in Chicago. He is the co-founder and spiritual director of Living the Course, an online global Course in Miracles community with over 10,000 members. In 1999, Mark experienced a complete healing from his traumatic childhood through the power of forgiveness. He was also granted a direct connection to divine guidance, which gave him the ability to channel transformational healing sessions for individuals and groups, constantly proving that every problem has a spiritual solution. His mission is to help individuals heal their unconscious commitment to suffering, experience true forgiveness, and awaken to the revelation of heaven within. Wow. Yes.
Yeah, wow.
Awesome. Awesome, Mark. Where do we start here?
Go big or go home.
Well, you've definitely done that. So before we get into starting our conversation on forgiveness, in the beginning of your sharing at the summit, you just mentioned that you were non-binary, and I just really want to honor you for being here and being willing to participate in this. I know it's the New Thought Men's community, but we are a New Thought community. So, of course, we honor the diversity and uniqueness of everyone. And I'm so glad that you are one person that gets to represent some of that diversity here today for us. So we really welcome the LGBTQIAA plus community here, and we are an ally and an advocate for that, for all equality, for gender equality, for racial equality. This is the truth of who we are as a spiritual community and a fundamental truth. And so we wouldn't be a New Thought community if we weren't actively saying yes, that everyone is a part of our community. So thank you for that.
And thank you. I appreciate you for that. And, and the non-binary is just my gender. Clearly my biology is male. And so I do qualify as a man physically and love my physical body as a male. I just happen to have happen to have a gender that is literally feels equally masculine and feminine. I can't choose one over the other.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
And the truth is like, we all have that on some level, right? We all have masculine, like if we want to break it down, we have masculine traits and feminine traits. And I myself would probably be classified as a more feminine person, more gentle, kind, giving all of those stuff that we ascribe to the feminine.
Yeah.
But as we're evolving here, it's just about being human, right? And these are just things. These are just traits. Though in our past society, we've ascribed them to a certain gender. I love especially what the young people are doing. And it's just like, no, those are just the things. That's just the stuff. Who I am is who I am. And we all get to be our unique selves. So grateful that you were able to help us speak to that today, because that's on my heart as well.
Beautiful.
Um, so more on that, I'm sure, coming up in our community, and then we'll share that. But to speak to what your sharing was at the summit on forgiveness, um, boy, this is one that I'll be honest with you, Mark. I have struggled with this one. Sit in meditation, sit and chant, do prayers, sing, all of those practices, like no problem. But forgiveness, sit down and do a forgiveness practice. I'm like, I think there is some resistance in me. So I'm glad you're bringing this up today, because there's definitely places and times in my life where I have noticed that I am holding on to that, like almost like that badge of courage, like, I was wronged. Gosh darn you, I was wronged.
Yeah.
And instead of it actually being forgiveness, it's an opportunity for me to stay in that ego, to stay in that, and not that the ego is a bad thing, but to stay in that place of defensiveness around it is maybe how I would say it. To stay in that place of self-preservation versus being able to release that and let it go and not have that drive and run me on some level, probably on unconscious levels.
Right.
So to allow this to come to more of a conscious realm of understanding today has been super powerful, and it's brought up some stuff as well. I can relate. I think in my own story, I'm a neurodiverse person. I am very playful, or my mind is very playful with numbers and letters. So they call me dyslexic, and that was challenging growing up. My mom was a teacher, and so she pushed me as hard as she could to help me get through it. And there was a lot of wounding that had happened, and now that she's kind of in her late time on this planet, I'm wanting to forgive her. I'm wanting to allow that process of forgiveness to happen between us before she leaves the physical body.
Yeah.
And so I'm really grateful for this talk today, because it really has brought up a lot around how do I do that? How do I show up in that new way? How do I show up minus the story around how I was hurt and how I was misunderstood and how I was, yada, 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 and move that story into a place of being able to actually forgive and genuinely forgive.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm gonna stop right there and let you take it.
Well, I mean, I appreciate your honesty about that. And, I was what I consider today to be very blessed, because mine was a life or death situation.
Mm,
The story was so painful that it was killing me. And so that's sort of like I was biting the dirt so much that gave me an uncommon desire to become free. Most people, and this is kind of the problem, I guess I could say, like, if you're living in this sort of middle grade, it's not great, but it's good enough, and if you're managing your personas and you're managing your masks and you're managing your stories in a way that they're not totally making you hit the bottom, but they're also not allowing you to go into your full spiritual expression.
mm,
This is where I think people get stuck. It's because it's that middle thing where it's good enough, So we have to really get hungry. We have to get hungry for our spiritual truth, so much so that tolerating discomfort becomes not acceptable.
yeah. Mm. Whew, yeah.
Yeah. Well, again, like, I would tolerate discomfort if I could.
Yeah.
I've also tasted the gift of so much freedom from forgiveness
Mm,
that it's kind of my bar. It's just been set for me by just such a blessing that I really can measure everything against that, and very little of this world is worth accepting if it's going to lower my vibration and make me argue to be right about something. The payoff is not worth it.
Yeah, that's powerful. What you said in your sharing was the egos need to be right, or that defensive structure. I would say the part of us that is the safety keeper on some level for this body, this mind, this experience. Need to be right in order to reinforce that belief system that says, yes, I am okay because I am correct. And rather than allow ourselves, or I can own it, allow myself to really let go of that. Sometimes even the defensive part of me will double down on it. It's like, no, even just talking to myself and not willing to let that part of me that has, so identified with that story or that experience. It's like, it's just like every once in a while, something will trigger that, as those the neurons firing in our head. That memory got triggered by something, and it's like, puts me right back in a place of frustration or anger or, upset or disappointment. And yeah, it is a bit of a humbling experience to say, yeah, do I want to be right? Or do I want to have forgiveness? Do I want happiness? Do I want that genuine sense of peace with someone else?
Yeah. Well, you're touching the deepest issue, which is where, honestly, my brother, the path gets very narrow, because what you're also describing is, do I want to be this body, or do I want to be my spiritual freedom and truth? And there's still, and look, man, I'm going to be really blunt. Metaphysics teaches clearly we are not this world. We are not this body. And people are trying to be both and. And if you think you are the body, you will protect it. If you think you are this physical world, you will have to guard yourself, because this physical world is limited. This physical world and this body is vulnerable. I am not my body. I have no belief that I am this body any more than I believe I am the clothes I wore yesterday. It is simply a vehicle that will be laid down when it's done. But because I don't need to protect it as my identity, I'm not collapsed with this. I am the life of God, and that's all I am. And that is all every sacred text has ever pointed to. But again, if you're trying to do both and, forgiveness is going to be hard, because forgiveness will only take you to your absolute spiritual truth, where there is nothing of this world that could hurt, harm, or injure you. That's where the healing takes place. That's what we teach. That's how bodies are healed. Bodies are healed because we go to the remembering of our divinity, where there is no brokenness or no dis-ease. We tap that, and that flows into our experience. So, in order for forgiveness truly to work, as it did for me, it lifted me out of the body, and it showed me the light of my being. And so this body is doing what it'll do. I mean, it sounds crazy, but if this body's hit by a car in an hour, whatever, in body, out of body, I have no preference. I have no preference. And that's a narrow path.
Yeah. That is truly the metaphysical path of seeing ourselves in that true form of this, experience and expression of, and this is how I say it, the experience and expression of this living force that's in, through, and as all things, this light, this creativity, this expression. And on my good days,
yeah.
I get there and I can be in that space. And on those days, when there is challenge, when there is struggle, when there's something you mentioned, something politically or something socially going on, that's just like poking at me, to remember, to remind, you even spoke about this, like really, entering into that practice to mindset, building a new mindset and a new experience of what we're referencing and where we're referencing it from. So if I'm referencing it from the fact that, I was dyslexic and my teachers didn't realize it, my mom didn't realize it, and I really struggled and it was painful, and so learning is really painful and learning is this, and now all these associations. But when I can truly back off and say, what a gift. I'm a creative person. My brain does not think the same way as everyone else's. And that's actually a good thing. It's a beautiful thing. It's allowed me to innovate and be and enjoy my mind as it is now, but it took me forever. And I think that was the process of going through ministerial school and forgiving. And it took 5 years to ultimately forgive that process and by which we're indoctrinated, called school. And it was so hard because it had been so ingrained, and I had to go through all the pain and suffering and all the why me and why am I in school again? Good God, what kind of idiot goes back to school after they've been so wounded by it? I doubled down on it. What? And, it was that greater experience. It was that greater healing within me that was being called to. And honestly, it was the one of the few things that I had never addressed and that I couldn't address any other way but going back to school. So thank you.
Well, what you're describing to me is your revelation, and this is the gift. You're perfectly wired. You're perfectly wired. How did you get there? By all of the stories about you being dissolved. And you're like, oh, wait a minute. That's a perfect example. Whether you use forgiveness to get there, whether you use prayer to get there, it doesn't matter how you get there, you got there. A thought that was coming to my mind about what you're sharing too is, this is what I love to do. I think in my hula hoop. And let me explain this. Most people get seduced by all the big global events out there, and they get stirred up and all their stories get activated. But the reality is, if they paused and really asked, am I going to do something about this today? Or am I just joining the wave of upset because I think that's something noble and I'm at least being right about something? That is so pervasive, and what it keeps us away from, which is where the real work is. And this is the disconnect. In my hula hoop, this is where Spirit wants me to do my work, which means I need to work on the neighbor next door that I haven't forgiven for our boundary line with our fence. I need to forgive the little things in my hula hoop. And remember that when you do your forgiveness work in your own life, that changes the world. One forgiveness act within your life, imagine it rippling into the oneness as a blessing that will do greater good than you could ever imagine. You see, we don't want to do that. We don't want to do our little work in our hula hoop and let that be sufficient. We want to get riled up about this big, bad, aggressive, angry world out there. And I get it. But again, let's be honest. What are you going to do about it today? Are you going to add to the collective complaining? Or do you want to maybe look at your own life and see how you could do one thing today, forgive, let go of one thing today, and imagine that to be a contribution to a greater wave of love? That's the real work, I think.
Okay, well, you put it like that, and of course.
See?
That's and good to find.
But that's our opportunity. Yeah. And I don't hear people, and you're seeing it now, emails flying. Let's get together. Let's say blah, blah, blah. I'm like, okay, great. Yes. And are you also doing the personal work? Because I can't show up to the altar of Spirit and have a grievance against my neighbor. I can't. I can't. I'm not allowed. I'm not allowed by my spiritual guidance to say that I can keep my little stash of my upsets and then profess about this world out there. Like, they're connected. They really are.
Yeah. And I think that's the foundational thing that think that we all get a new thought is like to do the inner work, and that's how we actually get to benefit the world. That's how we actually get to shift the consciousness. That's how we actually get to expand the understanding and grow that to the greater degree, rather than rah 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 out there. And not that being out there and protesting, or saying, hey, this is what I believe, isn't valid, but to be it, to embody that, and to have done the work. And I think that's what one of our core things is, to do the work here at the New Thought Men's community, because that's the thing that truly does free us. That's the thing that truly does allow us to be able to show up as the kind of person in our own lives, in the lives of our family and our community, and and even in the world, possibly, is to really show up as that, to be that, as opposed to saying, yes, I would like to be this way, but to be that and then show up as that. I think that's the most profound statement that we can make. And so
it is, and that's where our New Thought communities can become places where people can really do the deep personal transformation work and be loved through it, and be able to fall down and get back up, because it's an imperfect path. But it's not about our steps being perfect. It's about our willingness to really dedicate ourselves to our own path. And then from there, love, use me. Love, use me. I'm not a guy that's called to march with a sign, at least not yet. I mean, if I feel the call, then I'll do that. But for those of you who are, please take that extra time to pray and to put your heart in love, and know that everyone is like that's so vitally important to me.
Oh, that's powerful. I think, well, we're talking about the practice of forgiveness, and I think the biggest piece for me always has been, and maybe for others, because I am my harshest critic, is that self-forgiveness. To know, like, on some level, it's like I'm angry at you for doing that to me, but I'm more angry at myself for allowing that to happen, for not putting the kibosh on it, or walking away, or whatever it was, being in the moment, having happened what happened, or I didn't say what I wanted to say, or didn't do what I wanted to do. But so oftentimes I find that for me, being able to do that self-forgiveness first makes it a little bit easier to open up to that possibility of saying, okay, okay, you were a jerk to me, but I can forgive you, instead of like, oh, I can't forgive myself, but I'm going to try and forgive you for, I always work from the inside out. So I know myself as an introvert by now, like, I need to do that inner healing work and say, you know what, Eamon, I understand you were in an arrogant moment, or, you were out of line, or, you were just minding your own business, just going about your day, and this happened, and that's okay. Like, it's okay. And I forgive you. I forgive myself for putting myself in that situation. I forgive myself for getting all riled up, or being ornery, or whatever it was. I don't know. I'm just curious what your thoughts on that, the inner, the personal forgiveness, the self-forgiveness part of it.
Yeah. Well, ultimately, and you're right on it, because ultimately all forgiveness is self-forgiveness. It truly is. And that's too big of an idea to fully unpack. But what as you continue to walk the spiritual path, what I know and what I have seen is that the world in me is the world I see. Now, I'm not talking about blame, and I'm not talking about guilt. I'm not talking about shame. I'm just talking about reflection. That is spiritual law. What I see is what I am. So there's only two things ever happening. I'm either extending love, or I'm crying out for love. And if I see everyone as that gives me space to go, you know what? They just forgot who they are. They're crying out for love. Am I going to double bind them in their pain, or am I going to
Mm,
set them free by remembering that, oh, you're loved, you're whole, you're complete, this is my work? As that goes outward, it is for some reason harder sometimes to go inward
mm,
because there are times when I'm crying out for love
yeah.
and I just can't. There's just something within me that still thinks I'm left out, or I'm not going to get mine, or whatever it says, and that is my crying out for love. And am I going to have compassion and love myself, or am I going to do what I typically do when I get afraid and beat myself up?
Mm, right.
So I'm with you. Yes, like, those parts of me are crying out for love and care and compassion.
Mm,
And sometimes I'm just too darn hard on myself.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm, yeah.
And
Can relate.
I want to add real quick, because what you also said, and this is true that I'm finding, like, if I'm in an upset with someone with something that happened, something in my life today, not a real experience of past or a real victim experience. I'm not saying there aren't victims here, but there's a difference between someone who's in a victim experience and those of us who are walking in a perpetual victim consciousness.
Mm, mm,
That's what must be healed. And when we heal our perpetual victim consciousness, we will actually care better for the real victims
mm,
of the world.
mm.
But when it's all smeared together, it gets confusing. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Abs-
So that's an important distinction.
Yeah.
I don't want to dishonor that experience. But let's say with my husband, there's something that occurs and I'm in some upset later that day and I'm in my head. If I really pause and I really go within and I pray and I ask to see my part, I will often, because I'm so willing now, I will be shown.
Mm,
What did I not say?
yeah.
What did I say yes when I meant no? Where did I dishonor my truth? And that's what you're pointing to.
Mm,
I'm upset with myself somehow because I didn't take care of me. We still want other people to read our minds and we don't have to ask for what we need. Will you please just do it so I don't have to be vulnerable and ask? Will you please just read my mind so I don't have to put up a boundary? you know, like we need to mature.
yeah. I
We
can't
need to.
relate to that at all.
I know. I can tell by your smile. Well,
Oh,
send me blessings then.
yeah. Just you, not the
Yeah,
rest of us as well.
this
Yes.
is a call. This is a collective
Oh,
call for us to become spiritual adults.
yeah. Yeah.
And that means responsible for our yeses and for our nos, for our boundaries, for cleaning things up. When we get better and better and better at that, there will be less to forgive.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. You're calling me out on a lot of stuff here today, Mark.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm with you. Believe me, I'm with you. I do all these things myself. I just have, like, again, I've been practicing a lot, so I have a quick draw to see it. I have a quick draw to go to spiritual practice, and I really seldom, honestly, hold myself hostage for the. Like we got, like you were pointing to, if we're not going to love ourselves through these growth edges, then other people aren't going to be able to either. So it's both and.
Compassion, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow, this has been an amazing conversation. I have one question that I'd like to end with, and that is, what does healthy masculine look like in the 21st century?
Mm.
I'd love your take on that.
I think in our current time, so many constructs are collapsing. So many institutions, our financial institutions, our religious institutions, so many systems are archaic and outdated. Our relationship structures are outdated for the current evolution of spirit. And that's the same for masculinity. I think that it is a really welcoming of the dissolution of all that we thought it was, like really bring it down to zero and then let something brand new be born. And I think that's more of a question than clarity. Like, I imagine it's got strength and warrior energy when we are called forth to be the warrior. But I also think it's more balanced with the softness and the not the no, the we don't need to posture, the ability to cry, the ability to feel confused, the ability to be afraid and to wear that on our sleeve. um, it's it's more balanced, it's less postured, but it's also still powerful.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't want it to lose its, whoa.
Trigger.
when yeah, well, we need that,
Yeah.
that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
But as I know, it's more shared. It's not in this particular body form and not that other body form.
Yeah.
It's a shared. So I think it's a lot of rebirthing and a lot of welcoming a new expression of it.
Mm, mm. Yeah. Yeah. Beautifully said. Yeah. This is, we're ready for it. I mean, we're ready for it. We've been stuck in these old paradigms for a long time. And we as men have, been required to shove it down and be half men in some respects. And I want to be my whole self. I want to be my authentic self. And what I see out there, with just a lot more, but especially in the younger generations that are just saying, yeah, we don't have that shit. We're just going to be our authentic selves.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of almost being inspired by young people to just be my authentic. Not saying that, not trying to put them up on a pedestal, because, there's plenty of learning, there's plenty of experience. And I know that when we put things up on a pedestal, eventually it needs to get knocked off for us to be able to integrate it or whatever. But I think to be able to show up as the authentic self and the whole self is what's being called for. And that's what I hear in what you're saying. And
Yeah.
I'm 100% in alignment with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I am very blessed because I'm a gay man and I'm non-binary. So I actually don't have the masculinity issue, although people see me as a man, and I get that, and I love my male body. I love it. But inside, I really don't have that construct of which you speak.
Beautiful.
I just don't.
Beautiful. It's good to know. It's good to know. Yeah. So we can have that, finding this new way, and we are finding this new way. It's an exploration. It's not this is the path. Like somebody who says this is the path, that's, in my opinion, that's not the path. That's how we get like Andrew Tate's and stuff like that. This is masculinity,
Yeah.
and we're all finding it for ourselves. And I think that's
Yeah.
the most important thing, to really seek it within.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt you. That's why I do take this moment to thank you, because your ministry is relevant. It is relevant now. And you're asking this question as a men's ministry. Like, that's so progressive, man. I really thank you. Thank you for answering your call to bring this question forward and to bring men around it and to redefine it together. I mean, you're doing it. You're doing it.
Thank you. Thank you. We're giving it our best shot. That's for sure. And I know you're doing it too. I just appreciate you being on here today, being a part of the summit. Just admire so much what you've done and who you are and how you show up in the world. Thank you, Mark Anthony Lloyd, for being here with us today. I hope you enjoyed this interview from the New Thought Men's podcast. For instant access to all podcast interviews, talks from our summit, men's groups, and so much more, join us at newthoughtmens.community. Thanks so much for being with us today. There's more to come, so stay tuned in.